Yeah, one of the complaints I hear, from people in certain homesteading circles on Twitter, I'm sure you've seen this also, is like, why are millennials' farms so ugly? Because we're broke. They're ugly because we're broke. We can afford chicken wire and tarps and T-posts, and so everything is made out of chicken wire, tarps, and T-posts.
This is the Farm Hop Life Podcast, a traveling homestead family. I'm Matt DeRosier. On the Farm Hop Life Podcast, we learn what it takes to grow your own food from everyday people. Could be a college student, grows tomatoes and salad greens on their apartment patio, a former VP of marketing for Del Taco now raising cattle in Montana, or someone who hasn't had a homestead in over 10 years. This show is aimed at teaching you what it takes to make homesteading work for you, that we all make mistakes, we all have bad days, but we can reach out and help one another thrive, and giving you the confidence needed to go feed yourself. Writing for Unprepared Life, which is your Substack, by the way, for those that aren't aware. How did that come to be? And does that, I'm assuming your preparedness journey started before you even started writing about it, and somewhere along the line, your homesteading
Hmm.
falled into the into being prepared.
Yeah, I would say my homesteading preparedness journey started actually about 10 years ago, almost exactly now. Really started with the riots in Ferguson, Missouri, and I watched all the live streams of that, and seeing just all kinds of crazy things in the streets, and the thought popped in my head that this is a sign of things to come. And so that's really what kicked me off into prepping. And I think that combined with general fatherly paranoia. I think when you're responsible for a child or children, you tend to be acutely aware of threats. And so,
I agree, 100%.
yeah, but the actual homesteading part started even before I got into preparedness, because like at one point I was a foodie, and we'd started subscribing to a CSA, and I really liked the produce we got from it. And so originally, why I started gardening and started getting interested in homesteading, it was because I wanted better quality of food, and I wanted to better understand the process. And so those things just kind of came together. And then we had about 1 acre in the nearby city that would have been a great little homestead, and they passed a law so that you couldn't have anything except a dog or a cat. No chickens, no rabbits, nothing.
Was that a city
So what's that?
ordinance?
Yeah, it was a city ordinance in a really small rural town, which was kind of surprising. And so we bought a little 5 acre property outside of the city limits, outside the reach of the law, and came out here. And so now I have a setup. I do a few raised beds. I have some chickens. I used to have a lot more before a raccoon got a bunch of them, and I also raise rabbits for meat and manure.
When did the when did that raccoon get at your chickens? Was that recent?
That was last year. It was like the
Okay.
the end of 2022 into 2023, and it was a lot of it was just my own stupidity, because I'd set up an electric net fence with a solar charger, and I thought, wow, this is working really well. I end up brooding uh, a flock of chickens from eggs. I was super pleased with that, and so I was like, oh, I'll just let them kind of run loose a bit. I got chicken tractors for them, and I got this electric net fence. Give them plenty of space, and let them run free. And anyway, raccoons started slowly picking them off, and I need to do an unprepared post about this, actually, because I finally figured out the trick to getting rid of them.
Oh yeah. Are you gonna give us a teaser, or are you gonna
Yeah,
have to say
I'll just
subscribe?
tell you. Yeah, I'll just tell you. So one of the cooler things that's happened to me lately is I found a church full of other homeschooling homesteaders, and so it's kind of humbling, because I went from being the weirdo who raises gardens and rabbits and stuff, and now like I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. Everyone's so much better at than I am. But a friend told me, he's like, "Hey, here's the trick to the raccoons: get arm traps." And it's basically like
Mm.
a metal Chinese finger trap. And so whoever to Cabela's got those. You got to get some rebar to stake them into the ground. And what you do, you arm the trap, you put something sweet in the bottom, like a marshmallow, or like in my case, it was Nutri-Grain bars, old Nutri-Grain bars from our preps,
Sure.
and yeah, and you just you come outside the next morning and you got your raccoon. And what's great about these, so they stick their arm in there, and then it gets trapped, and they cannot get out of it. And so dogs, kids aren't going to trigger it. Just raccoons, because raccoons are. And just to be clear to anyone listening to this that is horrified about my treatment of raccoons, let me promise you, raccoons are the worst creature in North America. I would rather deal with deer, bears, because here's what a raccoon will do. A raccoon, like if you're growing corn, and this has happened to me, if you're growing corn, a raccoon will come through and take a bite out of every single ear all in one night, ruin your crop just for fun. They'll do the same thing to your chickens. They'll come through, they'll get, and they know how to work latches. They can work simple locks.
Yeah, their
Um,
hands are like little people hands. Like they're
yeah,
really small. Yeah.
they're extremely clever and extremely evil. And then they'll come through and they'll take a bite out of each one of your chickens. And so you're going to have a whole bunch of dead chickens. And the critter hasn't even like actually eaten anything, right? Like at least a deer will come by. It'll eat like an ear or two of corn, like I will accept a certain amount of my tithe to Mother Nature. But what
Return of
raccoons do is,
surplus, right?
yeah, yeah. But what raccoons do to me is simply unacceptable. So yes, I will
Sure.
eliminate them without any mercy or remorse because they're evil. They're little demons. So yeah, you set up the arm traps, and then 22 rifle takes care of the rest. Because like once they're locked in there, you're not getting them out without serious injury to yourself. So yeah, that's the trick. If you're having raccoon trouble,
Sure.
arm traps. That's the way to go.
I've heard, and I can't remember if it's raccoons or coyotes that do this, but if their arm gets stuck in a trap, they will actually gnaw their arm off to get out of the trap and survive. Now, I don't know
I,
if you've experienced this at all.
I've never seen a raccoon do that. I actually ended up trapping 3 raccoons in a row. And I told my wife, like, if I trap one more, I'm out of the chicken business because I'm in the business of raising eggs. I'm not in the business of murdering raccoons. As much as I hate them,
That's
that's
true.
not my
That's
primary thing.
that's
And
true.
so I actually caught one with its face. It had tore a hole in my chicken tractor, and its face was in the chicken tractor. And it was perfectly still. I thought it was dead. So I walk up to it. I'm like, I couldn't shoot it because like it was right up on the chicken tractor. So I'm like, what's going on here? So I poke it with my rifle, and it turns around and starts hissing at me. Well, and that was the end of that. That was his final hiss. But yeah, so that's how you take care of raccoons. I don't unfortunately know a better way. I tried all the methods. I tried play a radio or have lights, and no, they're not fooled that easily.
I think it was Long Story Farms on Twitter that said that a raccoon had reached in the the through the coop, grabbed a chicken by its wing and ripped the wing off. But that chicken kept on living, but
Hmm. Yeah, they'll
deformed,
do that.
obviously.
I had originally in my first chicken tractor, I had flaps to collect eggs, and I thought it was very clever. I mounted egg nesting boxes inside the tractor. I had little flaps that made out of hardware cloth. You open up, and that worked for years until the raccoon figured it out. And the raccoon figured out it could reach through there and grab a chicken, pull its head off. It could slide in there. Yeah, just if you have raccoons, no
Monsters.
level of security is enough.
My neighbor takes care of all my raccoons. Apparently, I was like, man, I'm like the world's best homesteader. Not really, but like I don't no loss of chickens, and it turns out that my neighbor's been shooting them. He got like
That's a good neighbor.
five in one night or something.
I take care of all the raccoons. My neighbor takes care of all the bobcats. So that's our
Oh,
trade there.
that's a good trade. What state are you at? Or are you not disclosing?
Oh, I'm in Tennessee.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought it was like east of the Mississippi, that general area. I couldn't remember if it was like Kentucky or something. But
Yeah, I live very close to Kentucky, and I spent a lot of time in Kentucky. So yeah, I mean, it's just kind of on the border there.
nice, very nice. So, so you were a foodie. You wanted to get better tasting food, more nutritious. That's how you say that. And then the Ferguson riots kind of, you know, drew something out on you that wanted to be better prepared. Did you? What was your first step in getting prepared, and looking back, would you recommend that was a good first step?
So I'll answer the second part first, and the answer is no. But the first part is, I think really my first step into like pure preparedness was Dave Canterbury and learning about bushcraft, and especially like he at the very beginning of his YouTube channel, he had all these great videos where he'd like go into like a dollar store and build like a bug out kit for like $20 or
Oh,
something. Like
yeah.
he was great at like the poor man, working man kind of stuff. These days Dave has a lot more money, so his setups are a lot fancier. I mean, he's still fun to watch. But I really got into like the minimalist bushcraft sort of stuff, like learning to cut the various notches and tie all these different knots, and build shelters, just out of like what you find in the woods. And I think those are all really good things to learn.
Did
How
you take a course or like a workshop on that? Or did you just go do it and try it?
Yeah, I watched a lot of YouTube. I did take part of So there's a forum, I think it's called Bushcraft USA, and it's still around. And they actually have an online course of sorts where it's kind of an honor system thing, but you basically go through and like there'll be like there's different lessons, and okay, so like okay, make feather sticks and then post a picture of your feather stick on the forum, and then
Hmm.
you can an administrator will let you buy a badge. I never bought the badges, but it's sort of a correspondence course, and I did some of that. I don't think I ever posted there. I just kind of followed along with the lessons and a lot of YouTube videos, and just going out with a knife and grabbing whatever sticks I could find, and just doing that stuff, and that's really like a thing with any kind of preparedness, especially outdoor stuff. I mean, a certain amount of book knowledge is good. It's good to at least understand the theory, but you're not really learning until you're
Right.
actually doing it.
That's right. Yeah, just like people with chickens, like I've talked to people that, they read everything they could on chickens for a year or two before they actually got chickens. And well, that was a year or two you could have had actual experience. But hey, if that made you feel more comfortable to know what you're getting into before you started getting into it, I guess that's fine.
Yeah, I'm definitely that sort of person. I probably read 100 different books on chickens before getting chickens, and honestly, I'm not sure it helped that much. I think what helps is to just get the chickens and then suddenly realize, oh crap, I need a place to put these chickens when they get older. Oh crap, I need a brooder box. Oh crap, what do you feed these things?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to be said for just throwing yourself into the deep end of the pool and seeing what you can do with it.
Yeah, and that's where a community can help you get out of the deep end if you need to get out of the deep end. Like, hey, you have chickens. Have you ever blah blah blah?
Yeah, absolutely. And and this is one of the things I really push on unprepared.life now. And I have for over a year now, because for the longest time I was doing this stuff all by myself. I mean, outside of online communities, which aren't really communities, let's be honest. I didn't really have anyone else doing this stuff with me. And, in any social group I was in, I was the nut. And so, now I have a social circle, full of farmers, homesteaders, all these kind of people, and I can go help out on their farms and help them with projects. And I've learned just so much in that, far more than you could learn from any book or even a YouTube channel, and just, having that actual experience, and be able to just see what they do and then be able to ask them questions like, why do you do that?
Right.
And get all this learned experience. And another thing, with homesteading, especially gardening, is so much knowledge is hyper local, or at least pretty specifically local, right? Like someone who's living in Idaho, someone who's living in the Pacific Northwest, someone who's living in Tennessee are going to have very different takes on what to plant, when to plant, what the soil conditions are, what the unique challenges are. You really need someone, you know, most of my people are in Kentucky, but it's close enough. You need somebody in your neck of the woods who understands the unique challenges of the area, and also understands
Sure.
if you're interested in making money, who understands the markets and how all that works.
Yeah, that's a good point because I mean, your climate doesn't know what a state line is, so it doesn't
Yeah.
really matter that they're in Kentucky.
Yeah, absolutely. Like one of the things, I've always told people, like sweet potatoes are an awesome thing to grow. And then I'll hear from someone in like New Hampshire and they're like, no, that doesn't work here, because it gets so hot here in Tennessee. Sweet potatoes do great here. I struggle with regular like Irish potatoes.
Mm.
But like sweet potatoes do amazingly well. but with a few tricks. But if you're in a colder climate, that's not going to work for you.
So the property that you're on now, what kind of things are you trying out? So you said you have a chicken tractor. How come you
Hmm.
went with a chicken tractor over just a regular coop and run?
Couple of reasons. One is I didn't know where to put it. I didn't know where to put a coop. And so I've always liked keeping things mobile because I'm indecisive about exactly where things go.
If that helps.
I have a fear of commitment, I guess you could say, even though I've been married for 11 years. And also cost, because, coops are, pretty expensive, especially now.
Sure.
I started doing this stuff before, the Biden inflation kicked in. And so, I kind of wish I'd built a coop. If I knew now if I knew back then what I know now, I would have probably spent a lot more money back then. But that cost was a big one. And, a chicken tractor is fairly easy to build. It's fairly cheap to build and it's mobile. So it's a really good way if you're unsure about the whole chicken thing. It's a really easy way to get going and at least have some kind of shelter for them. At least if you're in a
Sure.
climate like mine where it's amenable to that. Like if it were much colder here, that wouldn't work at all.
Yeah, I guess there would be just different ways to insulate, and some people. I'm trying to think if I've heard of some people. Yeah, I know a guy. He does his mobile chicken coop. It's more like a, if you know John Siskovich, in what country is he in? It doesn't matter. I don't know. He's got a John Siskovich style chicken tractor that he runs during the summer months, and then in the winter he brings all his chickens into this huge high tunnel, and that's where they stay for the winter, so they don't
Yeah.
freeze to death.
Yeah, that's a good plan. There's a lady I really like on YouTube. I don't think she has a huge following, so I'm happy to give her a shout out. She used to go by Dirt Patch Heaven. I think you can still find her under that. And I think she's in Idaho, and she makes these really great setups. So the deal with her husband's like, you can homestead, but you can't use any. You have to use your own money to do it. So like everything has to be like self funded. So she finds
Sure.
like the cheapest solutions for everything, and like she has this really clever solution for gardening and raising rabbits in bitterly cold winters. She
Hmm.
makes these hoop houses, and then she builds these things called hotbeds, which are basically compost piles, like a cross between a raised bed and a compost pile. She builds a raised
Okay.
bed out of basically trash and scrap lumber, and then she puts a bunch of compostable stuff in the bottom, and then she covers the top inch or two with just a little bit of potting soil. And then she'll in the winter. She hangs her rabbit cages over top of them. So what happens is like that compost is breaking down. It's heating up the greenhouse. It's heating up the hoop house. The rabbits are pooping on the garden bed. Rabbit poop is a tremendous fertilizer. And it's very clean.
Sure.
Rabbit poop, to the best of anyone's knowledge, does not contain any human disease. So it's
Hmm.
very safe to use in a garden. And so she has her rabbits just hanging over top of these hotbeds. The compost is warming up the rabbits and keeping them from freezing. And the rabbits are pooping on the bed and fertilizing it and causing the compost to break down faster. So it's this really clever way of dealing with super cold climates.
Yeah, that is pretty nice. I've heard of people just using a compost pile near in like nearby, of like trying to keep pigs warm during the winter too. It was like more of like an experiment that they just did. They did just wood chips and then tried to uh, put a bunch of water on it to get it to break down, but there wasn't like that cycle, or it didn't have
You
the
know,
three
nitrogen.
components. Yeah, there's no nitrogen. So they had the carbon, right, from the wood chips. They didn't have any nitrogen. And then what was the third component? I forget the third component to make that whole thing work. But it just basically was a huge wet pile of wood chips, and that was about it. I mean, it
Yeah, I have
was
a couple of those.
massive. It was like a 10 yards of wood chips, just this massive pile. But
Yeah, I have a couple of those big piles of wood chips I got and I never used. Now my kids play on them. but
mine too.
wood, wood chips are amazing for building soil. I know a guy out here in Tennessee. He bought a property that was basically just a gravel pit, and he just imported literally mountains of wood chips. And now it's like a lot of it's like a rolling meadow, just because if you give it
Mm,
long enough time, the wood chips will break down into some amazing soil. I mean, it'll take years,
yeah.
even if you're adding a lot of nitrogen to it, because wood chips just take a really long time. But yeah, wood chips can make amazing soil. I have one pile I got 3 years ago at this point that's starting to break down some really rich soil. In fact, I may dig through it and fill up one of my raised beds with it.
Is that John Willis that you're talking about?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I know
Couldn't
of
think of
John
the name.
Willis. Yeah, he I listened to him on Nicole Sauce's podcast, Living Free in Tennessee. So
Yeah, yeah, I know Nicole. She's great. I know John too. I went out to the Self Reliance Festival a couple of years ago, so I was out on his place at SOE Tactical, and it's a pretty cool setup. It's hilarious because he has all these like really expensive like sports cars just parked in a field, and there's peacocks on top of them, just scratching them up, and
he
it
talks
just
about that all the time.
it just sums up John in a nutshell. It's like I'm successful enough to buy all these cars for kicks and giggles, but like I'm not that attached to them.
He talks about that peacock all the time. He's like, dude, I had to get rid of those peacocks because they were just like scratching up the hood of the Range Rover or whatever it was, and he's
Yeah.
like, just plus they're like the worst thing ever, and yeah, he's kind of funny that like that. Like he'll talks like I'm curious what you thought about touring his place a year ago, and if you were to go back and see what it looks like now, what kind of comments you'd have. But he talks about like being up at like 4 in the morning, working until 9 or later, and is that really how he operates, or at least does?
I mean, I couldn't tell you for sure. I don't like, we don't like hang out. I'm just, I met him,
Right.
but like, I will say he's a super intense dude, and he's made a huge success for himself. So if he says he works from 4 a.m. to 9 p.m. or whatever, I totally believe it.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody that consistently listens to Andy Frisella, I can imagine that he's a pretty intense dude.
Yeah, I first met John, and I gave him one of my stickers for Unprepared. And at the time, like the branding was just Unprepared. And later I made it the whole domain name. He took one look at it. He's like, "Where's your website?" I was like, "Oh, okay." And like just he's got that kind of mind. He's got that kind of eye. He can just instantly pick out like flaws in your plan. And I'm saying this in the kindest, warmest way because like he was spending and I was impressed. He was spent inordinate amounts of time on his day off, just guys just coming up to him and saying, Here's what I want to do for a business. Here's what I want to do for a job," and him just like poking holes in things. Like, okay, well, what are you gonna do if this happens, and what this? So, just a tremendously helpful guy. And a really great mentor to those who are willing to listen to him.
Sure. Yeah, it sounds like I've never met him. I've never been to Self Reliance. I'd probably go eventually when time allows. But it does sound like he wants, you know, people to be successful and succeed. That's why he's so hard on them. That he's like, guys that really just talk to him about like their hopes and dreams. He's like, you're not going to do that. And then
Yeah,
be like, oh, I'm going to show you. And then they go and do it. And like, well, it
yeah,
worked. Like, you proved
yeah,
me wrong. Thanks. Like, that's
yeah.
exactly what I wanted. That type of attitude.
He's very much that type of guy. Yeah.
That's cool. That's really cool. So, so your raised beds that you have now, how much, how much are you able to grow in those raised beds? And does it last you through the winter? Are you that kind of spreadsheet brain about it? Can you
No,
plan that out?
no, I should be. Like I'm honestly just really undisciplined about it. I can produce a ton of food.
Undisciplined dot life. That's the next.
Yeah, yeah. Well, see, one of these days I will have that domain name. For right now, it's unprepared.life
I'm gonna buy it.
for good reason. So, I will say I can produce a lot of food out of those raised beds, enough to feed my family of five for winter. No chance in hell. I have produced one of the things I really like making is kimchi. I really
Mm,
like fermentation. It's a great way to preserve food without electricity, and it's also a great way to add additional nutrient content to what you grow. Because, let's be honest, you can grow lettuce and spinach and everything all day. It's not going to feed you, it's not going to fill you up. But if you can
right.
produce, say, like cabbage, turn it to sauerkraut. If you can, and if you can produce, like a whole bed of Napa cabbage, you can get a ton of Napa cabbage out of a single 4x8 garden bed. You can produce a lot of daikon radish out of a single 4x8 garden bed. Although I don't tend to grow that anymore unless I need to break up soil, just because I can go to an Asian market and buy, one the size of a baseball bat for $3, and it will last me for like, 20 batches.
Sure.
But you can grow a lot of, a surprising amount of stuff out of those little raised beds. Uh, one thing, yeah, I wish I were better at potatoes because, like, in terms of calories, I could probably grow a lot. What I try to do with my gardens, and Jack Spirko had this advice, and I really think it's a great one, is to store calories and grow nutrients. Right?
Yes, I
Focus
have
on
heard him say
growing.
that too. Yeah.
If about the only thing in North America you can realistically grow for enough calories to feed a family is, other than beef or some kind of meat, is potatoes. Um, and potatoes are tremendous, but they have a lot of drawbacks. They tend to rot. They can rot in the ground. They get blight. They got all these different things. So I really do think, in terms of preparedness, I think you're much better off growing nutrient dense vegetables, things like kale, berries. I love growing raspberries. They're practically invasive. Like broccoli, cabbage is one of my favorites to grow because it's pretty filling. It's a great peasant food. It's pretty filling, has a lot of nutrients. You can ferment it, so there's a lot of versatility there. And then a couple of years ago, so my wife, her family has 100 acres, and we did a 1 acre garden there, and we did potatoes, sweet potatoes, a bunch of different kinds of squashes, summer squashes, zucchinis. Did a whole like patch of like pumpkin and butternut squash, and all these things, and just corn. Corn is another big one we did. And just to be honest, like we didn't have enough hands to work that much, and that's one of the things. When you grow your garden by that much, the amount of work goes up exponentially.
Sure.
And so, there's a lot of things. I mean, she spent a whole summer canning. My wife does a ton of canning, bless her. And we sold stuff at farmers markets. We froze. I mean, we filled 2 whole freezers full of the stuff we grew, and we still had a lot of it
Wow.
rot. Just because we couldn't process it all. And one of the things, I'll tell anyone looking to start out is, always aim for the end product. Like, okay, I'm going to plant lettuce in this bed. Okay, what are you going to do with that lettuce? How many salads are you going to eat? Are you going to sell some of this extra lettuce? If you don't like salad that much, why are you growing lettuce if you don't like salad? Questions like that. That's why
Yeah.
I like to do themed beds. Like I like to do like a kimchi bed. You grow like cabbage, and maybe you have hot peppers from the last summer. Maybe you grow that your cabbage alongside daikon radish, and you grow most of the things you need for like kimchi, or you grow stuff for salsa. Like a salsa garden is a really fun thing to do.
Yeah.
A lot of times, one thing I'm actually really good at growing. I'm not good at growing many things, but I'm really good with tomatoes for some reason. Probably because I grow in almost pure compost, and so I like to grow tomatoes alongside basil. That's a great combination. The basil, it's good to grow herbs alongside your vegetables. That tends to ward off the bugs a bit.
Oh,
Um,
nice. Yeah.
yeah, basil seems to be really good at that, for whatever reason. I guess the smell, and so my wife will. I mean, and we just get tons and tons of basil. If you learn how to prune it correctly, I mean, it's practically like a bush. And we always have way more than we can use. She makes pesto. She cans the tomatoes. She dries a bunch of the basil. Things like that. So you always want to think about, like, what am I going to do with this after I grow it? Because it's so easy to just grow way too much of something and then,
Yeah.
like, well, now what?
Yeah. A lot of it either like it almost gets to be too much. Like we haven't been pruning our tomatoes, and they do just get dense and bushy, and
Yeah,
it's like the black forest in there. And then like you go to like grab like a handful of tomato vines basically, and you pull it up, and like there's like all these tomatoes underneath, and like the bottoms are rotten because they just been
yeah,
sitting on the ground. Like, oh dang it, like
yeah,
shoot. And well, I guess those got to go, and or some aren't touching the ground and they're way too overdone, like they're split wide open, and
Hmm.
it's like crap, it's what a mess.
Yeah, yeah,
This year I'm going to
it's
try growing tomatoes upside down. This is something I've seen. So I'm trying to utilize more vertical space this year, and so I bought like some hangers that stick out like 12 inches, and then
hmm.
those like coconut core basket type, like flower basket things. I'm gonna
Yeah, yeah.
cut a little X in the bottom and try planting tomatoes growing upside down there, and then have basil in the top. I don't know if that's still gonna work for warding off pests, but we'll see.
No, I think it'll work pretty well. I've heard a lot of people have success with that. Yeah,
We'll see. So
I have the same problem with tomatoes. I forget to prune them. I forget to weed them, and like I just go out there and I still collect like buckets of tomatoes. Like even though like it just looks totally trashy, like just really poorly done tomatoes. Probably my least favorite thing about growing tomatoes is the supports for them. I tried the tomato cages, and those all suck. I hate them. So, friend of mine who a very successful market gardener was telling me about like a weave method you can do with like T posts, and so I'm like, okay,
huh.
I think I'll try that. I've done. I think he uses some kind of tape. I'm gonna have to get like specifics from him on that. What I have done that worked pretty well is put T posts on each side of the raised bed, and then I string along wire. I like years ago at Tractor Supply, I bought like I don't know, like 1,000 yards of like electric fence wire that I use for everything, and so I've done that method where I grow the tomatoes, and I put T posts on each side, and two essential tools for any homestead: T-post pounder and a T-post puller. And if you get those two, and if T-post, at least around here, they're just like on the ground. You can just walk out in the woods, and there's like 1,000 T-posts people just left behind. But those two tools, you can do a lot of things with T-posts. Chicken houses, trellises, wherever you need. And so and that's one way I've done the tomatoes, where I put the T-post on each side, and I just put a bunch of wire and several strands of wire. So as they grow taller and taller, I can just kind of support them on that. And I'll probably do something like that. I friggin' hate tomato cages. They're just terrible. Well, and they're flimsy. They're weak.
They last maybe two seasons. Yeah.
Well, it might have
The paint
lasted.
the paint like flakes off, and
Oh, mine didn't even have paint. I got the dirt cheapest ones, but they're so thin. It's like they just fall over. I have to put like I think I finally saw an electric fence post to just keep them up with. But like but then they take up a ton of room in your building or wherever you put them. I hate the whole thing. I think anyone who's grown tomatoes for more than a couple of years, they have an intense hatred of tomato cages.
one year I was hoping, I think it was the first year my uncle started his little garden, probably like, I don't know, quarter acre, half acre, no idea how big it was. And he planted he planted these raspberry bushes, and by the end of that summer, those raspberries were 11 feet tall. And so
Holy cow!
we
First
had to,
year.
his first year, and so we might have been second year, I don't remember. First year I helped him out, and so like he had to keep putting like those little cross braces with wire running down the sides to get the raspberries to kind of like just keep coming like straight up instead of just covering everything next to them. But they were crazy tall. They're like as tall as his sunflowers.
That's wild. I love growing raspberries. They're kind of taking over because they travel through rhizomes underground, and so they tend to kind of be invasive. And the first year I planted them, I got like three little plants from Tractor Supply, and do anything special, and I put them in the ground. And later in the year I got like two or three raspberries, which I was super excited about because I didn't expect any. And then the second year, one of the plants died, and the other two were kind of like, I was like, this isn't going to do so great. And then the third year, all of a sudden they started just popping by the ground everywhere. They took over a couple of raised beds in front of my house. And now this year, I think the second plant I planted has died, but now I've got like 50 more that have sprung up on the other side of the house. And so it's just, I get exponentially more raspberries every year. And, one of these days, I'm sure the whole property will be just nothing but raspberry, which I'm okay with, at least for a month out of the year when I get them.
Yeah, just raspberry galore. Just have to make like mead or something with it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I came across an old homestead in, oh man, what was the name of the national park in? I was just at in Washington. I forget what it was, but it was there was like raspberry bushes everywhere. No raspberries, but it was like March. But the
Mhm.
canes on them were like is like big as like your finger, and the thorns on them were just nasty. But they were like just everywhere. Just nobody's taking care of it, and 50 plus years.
Hmm.
But yeah, those suckers are still around. Last forever.
Yeah, yeah, they're amazingly resilient. We have a lot of blackberries that grow around here, so that's probably like we probably have soil that's good for berries in general. I haven't had any like. Well, what I really want to do is I want to plant different kinds of berries, so like I get berries through the whole season instead of just all at once. I keep trying to plant blueberries here, and for some reason they don't work. My mother-in-law
Hmm.
has like this amazing, like this blueberry bush is taller than I am, and we get tons of blueberries off of every year. But like, I can't get the darn things to grow for. I don't know, I'm probably putting them in the wrong place or something. Um, as well as I haven't quite figured out the perennials. I keep trying to do different kinds of trees, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the problem is I'm just putting them in, and like, yeah, that's good. It's a tree. It'll be all right. And, they need a lot more care than that, at least especially early on.
Sure. I saw on Facebook Marketplace this guy was selling established blueberry plants. They were like between 4 and 6 feet tall. He wanted
Wow.
$150 for them, and I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I can do that. I really want blueberries, but I don't think I want them that bad. Like, do you know how many little clamshells of blueberries you could buy for
I don't know.
150 bucks?
Blueberries are pretty darn expensive. Like I have a financial motive. My daughter, like, so my wife will go to Sam's Club and buy one of the big tubs of
Yep.
blueberry, and my daughter will eat the whole thing in like one sitting, and then just blow out her pull up. So
How old's your daughter? Because ours are probably around the same age.
she's two.
Mine's almost two.
Okay, yeah,
Yep. Yeah, just she's trying to say blueberry right now, and she just can't quite get it. But we know exactly what she wants.
yeah.
So that's funny. That's really funny. So other livestock, you just have the chickens,
Chickens and rabbits.
chickens and rabbits. That's right,
Hmm.
just rabbits. What? Let me ask you, how do you like to cook rabbit? Because I bought one once, and I threw it in a
Hmm.
crock pot, and man, I'm glad that I was the only one eating that because there were so many tiny little bones in there that like I thought like if I gave it to my son like he was gonna like choke and die. There's like constantly picking out bones.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good observation. When we first started, yeah, we were doing either crock pot or an old rabbit in a crock pot can be amazing. But a lot of times we're doing whole rabbits in the instant pot. And yeah, you get those tiny little bones, mostly from the rib cage. The rib cage has lots of little bones. And then my wife sort of like womaned up, and she figured out how to part out a rabbit. And like once she spent the time to work it out, like she realized it was really easy. And so
Mm.
I couldn't do it, but she finds it really easy. So now she parts out the rabbits. We just dispose of the rib cage. There's a little bit of meat there, but they're like the bone ratio, like you said, like it's a choking hazard. Because before that, we would either slow cook or pressure cook it, and we have to pick out all the bones, and that's just a real pain in the butt. Um, so now she just parts them out, and we cook it like chicken because rabbit meat pretty much tastes like chicken, and you can use it anywhere you use chicken. There's a dish, I think it's called adobo chicken. My wife likes to make. We call it
Mm.
Filipino chicken. It's a Filipino recipe. You take the chicken, you cook it, you boil it in vinegar and a mix of like sugar and some different spices, and then you fry it, and then you serve it over top, and you do that with garlic, like whole cloves of garlic, and you serve it over rice with black beans. It's really good, and it's really good with chicken, but it's also really good with rabbit. Um, I mean, you could fry it like chicken if the rabbit was young enough. And again, it's pretty much like chicken, right? Like if you got like the fryer rabbits, but take out at about 8 weeks or so, and then much longer than that. You have to slow cook it. Again,
Mm,
it's just like chicken, a little bit less meat on a rabbit than on a chicken. So a lot of times you probably have to cook like two rabbits to get the meat of like one decent Cornish cross. Um, but yeah, it's really good meat, super high protein content. In terms of like if you're into like bodybuilding or anything like that, the ratio of calories to protein is incredible in rabbit. And one of my favorite things about raising rabbits is, as I mentioned earlier, the manure, because they, unless there's something wrong, they deposit these perfect little spheres, these little dry pellets that you can just scoop up and you can just dump right in your garden bed. And so my gardens are fertilized almost 100% with rabbit manure. And they also convert really well. So everything you feed a rabbit either goes into meat or it goes into poop. Like they waste very very little.
sure.
So even when you're kicking yourself for buying the rabbit feed, it's going to, as long as they're reproducing correctly, which that's kind of iffy right now. For I think I need to replace some of my breeding stock. But even if you don't get the meat, you get the manure. And so every fall, after I'm done for the season, I'll go out to my raised beds and I will just clean out from under my rabbit cages, and I just dump that straight into the raised bed. I just leave it over winter, and as the snow and the rain and everything falls on it, it freezes and defrosts. It just turns into soil, and so that's one of the ways I keep my raised beds continually replenished. I had one that was like about halfway full, and I filled it all the way up with rabbit manure, and now it's you know full again. It's producing. I got spinach in it right now that's growing pretty well.
Dang.
Um, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So you get meat and you get fertilizer for your gardens at the same time. So like really, like a lot of people want to start with chickens, and that's fine. But I really think the move, if you want to do like you want to do animals and garden together, get rabbits, because then that produces your fertilizer, and that's of course you still have to get the rabbit food. There are some workarounds to that, but that makes your dependency loops just a little tighter.
Sure. One thing that I thought about doing was just getting. I used to get my chicken feed from this place that was real that from this other homestead that was really just like a reseller of like another feed, local feed,
Hmm.
and they must have had 200 rabbits running around the entire property, just free range. I'm like, what if I took like 20 or 25 of them and just brought them back to my place and just like let them go and they can kind of establish their own burrows and whatnot. And then if I ever needed a food source, it's just there. But I don't want to take care of it.
So the couple of flaws with that. One is they'll eat your gardens.
That's
The
true.
the second one is rabbits on the ground tend to acquire parasites,
Oh,
um,
really?
which is
That's
why you
weird because
tend to,
that's where they live.
and a lot of them in the wild have parasites, just simple as. So that's why people tend to use hutches. Actually, hanging cages are better. The problem with hutches, I have this problem all the time, where you have like the two by fours running across to support the cage. Like poop tends to pile up on those because it can't
Yeah.
fall through, and then that's a big pain. If you can just have them like free hanging under some kind of awning, that's the ideal. Um, Now, what a lot of people will do, I'm really thinking about moving to this. I need to kill a stray rooster and free up a chicken tractor and try this. What a lot of people will do is they will keep the the meat rabbits, the ones that are going to be processed. They keep them in a colony, and they'll keep it in something like basically a chicken tractor. Except, of course, the bottom you have to put hardware cloth or something over because they will dig right under the rabbit tractor or whatever you call it. And then you can keep them on the ground, and you can keep them eating grass, and they're going to be exposed to parasites. But here's the thing: if you slaughter them at 8 weeks, you're going to slaughter them before the parasites can take hold. So that's kind of the trick there. I haven't actually tried that. Those are the things I've read about. Seems like a great idea. Seems like a great way to reduce your feed costs. Um, and another thing I've considered too is just having some raised beds just dedicated to just rabbit food, right? And just
Sure.
kind of close that loop there. I don't know how satisfactory that would be. I do feed them hay off my property sometimes. There for a while, I was mowing with a scythe, and I was able to make my own hay. And I got a somewhat more demanding job, so I just started paying someone to mow for me. I hit 40. I'm like, I don't have time for these silly notions anymore. But yeah, there's a lot of ways you can cut down your rabbit feed costs that wouldn't necessarily work with chickens. I mean, you can give chickens you can give them fresh access to fresh grass, and give them food scraps and cut your feed bill significantly. But at some point they have to have the protein to make the eggs, right?
Right. Right, that's true. I was looking at how to make a black soldier fly larva container. You basically take those black and yellow bins and put pieces of folded up cardboard underneath for the
Hmm.
flies to lay eggs in, and then pieces of PVC something have some sort of container, and then
Hmm.
goes right into the chicken run. So there's ways to instead of paying for mealworms, you could do something
Yeah.
like that.
If I were a much more clever man, maybe I'll give someone a good idea here. So if you have like a worm farm, if you raise your own worms, which I'm terrible at, I don't think I'm going to try it again. But if you raise your own worms, they absolutely love rabbit manure, and if
Hmm.
you put rabbit manure in the worm bin, like it will cause the worm population to just like quadruple like almost overnight. So a lot of people will do is they'll keep like a big like wooden worm bin under their rabbit cages, and the worms just kind of live in there and process the rabbit stuff, and you throw in your beds. But if you're really clever, you could take some portion of those worms and then feed your chickens, right? Like
Sure.
I don't know how much energy overall you would capture doing that, but it's something worth exploring. I mean, I'm kind of curious about now. I never really thought about it before.
And then in your worm bin, since you don't want to just go digging up worms, like that could take a lot of time. Have you seen these guys on YouTube or TikTok or whatever with the stick in the ground and doing like they
Hmm.
have like that
Hmm.
resin, and the worms just get drawn to that thumping sound or whatever?
I believe they're called Fremen.
I don't know. I don't know what they're called.
Sorry, I was making a Dune joke there, but yeah, because in the Dune in the book and the movies, they summon like the sandworms by putting a thumper
Okay,
in the ground. That's probably
okay,
where Frank Herbert got the idea for it from,
gotcha.
wherever it is they do to call worms.
I've not read Dune, and I've only seen like the first newer movie, not the second
Hmm.
part that just came out, but it's on my list. Not to read it, to watch it.
Yeah, no, you get to be our age. You get too many responsibilities. You don't have time to read like a 300-page book. Like, who has time for that?
But I'll listen to a 17-part podcast. That's fine.
Well, there you go. I mean, yeah, like we do a lot of audiobooks in this house.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, what would you say has been the biggest challenge in homesteading so far?
Mm. Ooh, that's oh man. There's so many things. If I had to just pick one, if I just had to pick one, honestly, like probably my biggest challenges in general is just inflation, right? The price of everything has skyrocketed so much, and there's all the things I want to do. I want to build out more, and it's 5 to 10 times more expensive than it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Sure. Yep.
That's tremendously challenging. There's so many different things like inflation would be one. The other one's just time, just the sheer amount of time, mental bandwidth, right? Because
That was going to be mine too.
yeah, yeah.
Money
I
and
mean,
time.
yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, because here's the thing. I have a day job. I do marketing in my day job. I run the Substack. I write tech books on the side. I do some freelance
Hmm.
writing. I have 3 kids. I also run this little homestead here. I'm pretty heavily involved in my church. I try to be a good friend to the people I go to church with, and help them on their farms and stuff. And so like, there's a lot of things. It's like I don't have, I don't have time to do that. Right? There's so many things like I wish I could pay more attention to.
Right.
You know, um, And so and then that can lead to a cycle where you feel like you're an imposter because you're not spending enough time. You don't you can't afford the stuff you need to do all this, and then you're just like, man, I suck at this. And then you have to take a step back and realize, okay, well, you made the choice to do all these things, and this is
Right.
just like you do when you can. I just always try to remind myself that for me, my own personal goal in homesteading is it's not even so much production, it's learning, it's having it's the same thing as keeping a knife sharp, right? It's like it's knowing my soil well enough, it's building up that soil well enough, it's knowing how to process these animals, it's knowing how to do these things. And so if things really do hit the fan, and this is something I'm having to do full time to feed my family, it's something I can competently do.
That's a good point. The money thing really hits hard for me. I'm like, all right, here's what we're gonna do, and my wife's like, how much is that gonna cost? I'm like, never mind. And I have to like re-engineer. Like, okay, so I found this thing on Facebook. It's kind of close enough to what we need, and then this other thing on Craigslist. Like, I think I can fix it, and then we
Mhm.
can use that as this part. And so like, I'm trying to get to like 90% of what it is we actually wanted with 10% of the cost. Kind of like, okay, how are we going to do a garage? That sounds expensive. All right, so what if we just like what if we just buried everything underground or something? I don't know. Like
Yeah.
get like one of those Quonset huts and just throw dirt on top of it. I don't know.
Yeah, one of the complaints I hear, from people in certain homesteading circles on Twitter, I'm sure you've seen this also, is like, why are millennials' farms so ugly? Because we're broke. They're ugly because we're broke. We can afford chicken wire and tarps and T-posts, and so everything is made out of chicken wire, tarps, and T-posts.
Oh man, it sounds. It's just. This is just like. I mean, did people really care about, the way their farm looked during the Great Depression, or like their victory
No,
gardens or whatever? No, it
I,
was
I've
functional, pure
I've
function.
yes, I've seen plenty of those old farms. My grandma lived on one as long as I knew her, which was the day I was born to the day she died. And yeah, they looked like crap. I mean, just honestly, they had probably a better rustic aesthetic because it was made out of like like, well, I got this lumber off this tree. I cut down in the backyard. Okay, well, we don't have as much of that. We have pallets now that
Yeah.
we helpfully get the Chinese helpfully send to us that we don't know what to do with. So, but it was always like that. I mean, unless you lived in like a plantation or some kind of rich estate, it was just whatever hard scrabble things you could slap together. If you go look at the old Foxfire books and see the handful of pictures they have in there, those were not pretty farms. Those weren't pretty houses. It was just like, here's what we have. We slapped it together, and this is how we survive.
Sure.
And so it's always been. And you can drive around the country around here, and there's a lot of people they live in a rusted out trailer, and they raise the same things I raise, and again it's a bunch of tarps and chicken wire and hardware cloth and T-posts, and they're probably glad to have it because it probably, I mean, because even that stuff isn't all that cheap, right? So I would love to have the big pretty aesthetic farm, but like realistically that's a luxury, always has been.
I wanted to share something really quick. It reminds me of this guy that I follow, that I found in this little town here. So right here, look at this guy that I just I I saw his setup and I just had to go talk to him. Look at the way he's growing his plants back here. So
Hmm.
they're just a bunch of water bottles with the bottoms cut off, flipped upside down, and he's growing all
Hmm.
these plants. And this is on the south side of his house, and so it just gets all this sun. And he lives in this brick building, and so like it holds that heat throughout the night when it gets cold, because like
Hmm.
in this area it the temperature swings from overnight lows to daytime highs and whatnot. And I need to follow up with this dude. I got to find him again and follow up and see how this worked out. I mean, look at he took this little pink balloon
Hmm.
and cut it up and put it over this little light. So
because he said something about red light versus something other light. I don't remember what he said, but he had a
Mhm.
lot of interesting theories about things, and he's just trying things just to grow
Mhm.
food, and that's like who cares, right? It's all
Yeah,
about
Eastern
results.
Europeans, Eastern Europeans have no time for BS. It's just whatever works,
I mean, his
right?
face says it all, right?
Yeah, yeah. That guy ain't putting up with your BS today. He's not putting up with your rabbit manure today. I go to church with a lot of Eastern Europeans, man. They're a trip. They're just like, no, like nah, I'm not BSing with you. This is this is what works,
Yeah,
right?
you.
I don't
It takes a
like, oh,
lot of time to figure out uh, when they're joking, like when they're making a joke, because it's so dry.
yeah,
Like, are you
it's
giving me crap right now? Oh, you're giving me crap. Okay, I got it. That's
yeah,
funny.
it's definitely a very different mindset than the American one. But it's something I think we have to adopt. Because I mean, I think most people who are surveyed agreed that things are not getting better in this country. I hope that changes, hopefully sooner than later. But as right now, as of April 2024, the general sense is that things are worse than they used to be. Things are worse than they were 3 years ago, and they're going to continue getting worse. And so we're going to have to adopt different mindsets. Those of us who are not in the upper crust, those of us who haven't made it, and you're going to you're escaping to the island or whatever nonsense you hear about. Like we're going to have to not only think about our systems and think about the base level things like, oh, do you have your rice and beans, and have you ever planted a garden? Those are good base things to have. But also just mindset, like do you have the mind? Do you have the mindset like that guy, where it's like, okay, look, I gotta grow food, I gotta feed my family. Okay, I got these soda bottles laying around. Yeah, they look like crap. Who cares? That doesn't matter. I'm gonna grow some plants. This is what we're gonna do. And it's the same. I mean, and it's the same attitude that the so-called greatest generation had. Like
Yeah,
I'm old enough to remember being around those kind of people, and they didn't care about things like that. They would go around wearing flour sacks. I mean, heck, they used to print flour sacks in floral patterns, just so women can make prettier dresses from them.
right.
Right? I mean,
It was
that's the kind of,
marketing thing. Yeah,
yeah, genius one at that. That's the kind of country we used to be. That's the America that became great. Was that hard scrabble, make do, can do attitude that we have somehow lost, and we think it's foreign. We think it's like, oh, that's a Eastern European attitude. Oh, that's a attitude for poor countries. Okay, that's the attitude that got us to the moon. That's the attitude that made us the number one country in the world. And we got fat, and we got lazy, and we've gotten soft. And there's going to be a time, unfortunately, I think, of correction. And look, I'm soft to millennial as anyone could be, but what I'm hoping though is my kids will be the ones who can help turn this boat around, and I hope I can raise them in
sure.
such a way that they learn these things, they see these things. I set an example, I set a cadence, so and they're around the kind of people that know how to do these things and can provide for themselves. And I just took my boys camping this weekend. They learned a lot of hard lessons doing that. And those are the kind of hard lessons they're going to need for the world they're going to grow into. So like as far as our generation, I mean, I think we're kind of doomed from the start. I've made peace with that. I've made peace with that. I have my mind on higher things, but in terms of like the material world, yeah, all my chips are on my kids.
That's a good place to put your chips. I
I mean,
mean, there's only so much you can invest in yourself, right? Like, how much, like, are you gonna give yourself when you're kind of like you're spent, right? Like I'm trying to kind of like growing. I don't know why it's on my mind. It's like growing mushrooms, right?
mhm.
Like you have like not the drug kind, the medicinal kind. You got
Could be
like your
either one.
mushroom blocks. That's true. It could be either one. You got your mushroom block, and you can get one, maybe two, possibly a third harvest. But like other than that, there's the energy in that block is for the most part spent. It's not worth putting more into it you kind of need to put your energy into the next mushroom block
Mm-hmm.
because that's going to be more fruitful. So, no, I totally agree. Like we made some financial changes so that we're trying to send my son to a nice preschool, like, half days, 3 days a week type thing, to kind of encourage different kind of learning that we can do at home. So we're kind of trying to do like some sort of balance, but it's a financial investment.
Yeah, I mean, probably one of the biggest financial bets I've made in the past few years is my wife had a very successful high school teaching career. That's a lifetime gig if you play it right, if you do anything stupid. And, she gave it up. And, now I am the breadwinner, right? Like
Hmm.
that's why I do so many things, right? So she can stay home and homeschool our kids. It's a big bet. It's a scary one. But, from our perspective, I mean, it's the only thing that makes any sense, right?
Right.
If you're not putting all your chips on your children, what are you doing? And like, unfortunately, I think there are so many of the older generation who aren't thinking about legacy. I'm not thinking about just me. I'm not even thinking about just my kids. I'm thinking about like, okay, what about 2 or 3 generations down the line?
Yeah.
What can this family be, in 50 years and 100 years? And I think that's really the way, that's the way the people in the ancient world thought about it. And that's the way I think what we have to return to.
That's true. I saw a really nice ranch, 160 acres in Montana for $700,000. I'm like, maybe, just maybe, which doesn't even seem like a lot of money. All things considered, like for other areas,
That's
it's
an
very
amazing
expensive,
deal.
but for the area that it is, it's for anyone that really cares. It's in the Missouri Breaks area of Montana, which is like world class fishing, world class elk hunting, stuff like that. So, but yeah, so wrapping up here because
Mhm.
I know I want to be respectful of your time. What would you tell people that want to get started? Homesteading, prepping, anything. I know those are two very different things, so it's kind of
Yeah. Well, I think there's a common thread, and the thing that really ties them together is mindset. And the mindset is like strengthen yourself mentally, physically, and spiritually, right? Like I think one of the I think probably maybe the biggest benefit of homesteading, and this ties into prepping also, is like, for instance, like, have you ever killed an animal? Could you take a chicken and take a hatchet and make dinner? Could you take a rabbit and a broom and make dinner? And a knife. A knife helps too. Can you prepare a garden bed, plant it, sow it, weed it? Do you have the patience for that? Do you have the kind of connection with nature to be able to do that? Can you sleep outside? Can you just sleep on the ground, just like a pad to insulate you? Can you take care of yourself for a week in the woods? These are the kind of things. There's so much emphasis in this prepping space on gear, because there's a really easy business model. I could follow this too, and maybe one of these days I'll just say screw it and I'll just do this. Fear and gear, right? I sell you the fear and I sell you the gear that you need, right? The frogs are turning gay. That's why you need a water filter. You need a water filter so your frog doesn't turn gay, right? Like, there's a really easy business model there, and it's made a lot of men very wealthy. But the reality is, look, you could have the most expensive bug out bag and the Gucciest of Glocks, and a Daniel Defense AR-15 and a 160-acre ranch, and if you piss your pants the minute someone breaks in your house, and none of it means anything. The main thing you need to develop is yourself, and I really mean that when I say mentally, spiritually, and physically. Spiritually, because you have to have a reason, right? You have to have a reason. You have to have faith in something, right? There has to be something more than just raw material existence, or you're going to fall into despair very quickly. Mentally, can you stitch yourself up if you have to? Like, for instance, I was processing a rabbit. I wrote about this in Unprepared. I sliced my finger in half, basically in half, and I had to super glue it back together. I never went to a hospital. I didn't cry too much about it. I just kept slapping glue on there and wiping up blood and slapping glue until it finally held together. And I got a really cool scar out of it. And I'm not Rambo. I'm not an especially tough guy. But do you have? I mean, but do you have that kind of fortitude where like you can do what it takes to survive when the chips are down, or are you going to panic and piss your pants? And also physically, get yourself into the gym. You don't have to be Arnold Schwarzenegger or anything. You don't have to be a champion bodybuilder. But like, look, can you lift your own? Can you deadlift your own weight? Could you pick up a family member and carry them to safety? Can you do a few pull-ups? Could you pull yourself up from a ledge? Could you push a heavy object off of your chest? Just very basic movements, and so many people are in the prepping space and they weigh 400 pounds and they're out of breath constantly. You need to do some cardio. You need to lose some of that weight. You need to put on some muscle. You know, you need to have and again, like you have all the finest weapons. You have all the ammo. You have all the food. And if you're panicky, scared, have no purpose in life, and you're running out of breath while trying to reload, you're going to be cannon fodder. If things get bad. So, above anything else, those are the three things I emphasize for anyone wanting to get into this space. And, it's kind of like if you ever played World of Warcraft or some kind of role playing game, and there's like these different skill trees you can go down. You can go down the gardening skill tree, you can go down the hunting skill tree, or you can go down the hiking skill tree. I don't know, just all these different, skill trees, tech trees. Ultimately the actual like thing you kind of focus on, the thing you decide is like your thing, whether it's gardening or ham radio, that's not so much the key thing. The key thing is developing those three attributes and becoming a resilient person, someone who is capable, knowledgeable, but, above maybe anything else, you have a sense of peace with yourself, right? So that you're not overwhelmed with fear, you're not overwhelmed with, physical malady, you're a fairly healthy person. Those are really the things that matter. And they don't just matter in case like, we have World War III next year. They matter in all aspects of your life, and there are tremendous gifts that you can give not only to yourself, but to your spouse and to your children.
Yeah, that's really, really well said. I'd love to add something, but I got nothing to add. That's great. So where can people find you?
All right. So if you want to read my writings on preparedness, that is unprepared.life. Unprepared.life on Substack. We have a paid subscription option. It'd be great if you paid me, but there's a lot of stuff you can read for free. And then also, I'm on Twitter or X or whatever they call it now. I probably wouldn't follow me on X. I don't think I follow myself on X, but I am a J Centers, JCENTERS. Because I have no focus on my X and my Twitter. I'd probably have 10 million followers if I did. I just tweet about random crap all the time and tick everyone off. But yeah, definitely, if you're interested in the preparedness topic, if you're interested in what I have to say about homesteading and gardening and community and all these things, unprepared.life is the destination.
I find a lot of value just in the free articles. If I wasn't so cheap, I'd definitely subscribe.
Honestly, I think most of my best stuff is free. But typically when I make something paid, it's because like I know someone's gonna get mad about this. I don't want to hear it. So if I have to hear it from you, you have to pay me.
That's a nice filter you got there. Very nice. Well, Josh, I appreciate your time very much, and I'm glad we could make this happen. It was a great chat.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt. Glad we could finally do it.
I am Matt DeRozier of Farm Hop Life. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and visit farmhoplife.com.
Inside of the city, the people are crazy, out of their minds, they ain't got a clue. We gone away, headed west for Montana, left family and friends, all I got now is you. We both got new jobs, a house and a homestead, thinking this was the life, all that there'd be. After our firstborn, you had to stay home. That's when the work got in the way for me. Well, I started Farm Hop Life. We'll come to your farm to help and to wander. Me and the family, a truck and an RV, Send us a message and there will